Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Glad to have you back for another amazing episode. I mean, amazing. That's already starting the show out right, Matthew.
Getting it started Tuesday morning. Amazing.
And if you guys haven't been caught up on the podcast, Matthew and I are going boot shopping, right? I mean, I'm supposed to be going boot shopping. So eventually when I come back from Dallas, we already have the date. I come back from Dallas, we'll have to I'll wear my boots on the Dental Wealth Podcast. You'll get to see the boots that we end up picking out, right?
You have to give us a star rating in that.
That's right. Give us your feedback on the boots.
Yes, give us your feedback.
What I want to talk about today is something that it's this idea of being proactive, but I'm gonna use it in an area, and it's really proactive with legal contracts and proactive with the way that you have systems in place around them. One of the things that happens all the time is, and I know why. As dentists, I understand you're in the chair all the time. But what happens is there's an associate, for instance, that pops up. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have a contract. Who can I call? What do I do? What do I pay them? How do I pay them? What's the percentage? I don't know. They want this. And it's just such a reactive place to be for one of the largest hires that you're ever going to make. And some people will only hire one associate, two associates. Now, some of you might hire 23, but even then, it's the same thing. What I find, and today I'm really talking about from a legal aspect, is that so much of legal work that I see in dental is reactive, that there's no policy and procedure. What happens with a DSO, when a DSO sits down with somebody and says, look, I'm going to hire an associate, it's very simple. This is how we pay people. This is your bonus. This is your structure. This is ... They don't allow the person to come back and go, well, my friend got 35%. Oh, okay, well, let me go back and think about whether I should. Hell no. There's a process in place by which you hire people. Now, you have to have enough acumen to understand if someone does specialty work, that your percentages might be a little different. You might have a specialty associate contract or something a little bit different. So I have seen that happen before. It blew my mind. Somebody was like, I let him go. I was like, why'd you let him go? And they were like, well, he wanted more than 30%. I was like, well, how much was he doing a day? Well, he was doing $20,000 a day of surgery. I was like, oh my God, like what? So you have to have some business acumen to understand when you pay what, okay? So, but shouldn't
At what point do you become proactive in the process? So we're talking specifically about associates. So, like you said, most dental practices are kind of reactive when it comes to getting the legal team involved. When it comes to associates, what's the ideal time?
But I want to say not just associates, and I'm going to come back on that because, there was not too long ago where there's somebody from an office who ended up becoming disgruntled because she was being terminated. And she ended up taking two assistants out of that dental practice. So those two assistants were the only assistants, by the way. So what did it cost that organization to lose the production revenue, to have to go find other people? The cost was large, right? So what they should have had done is had a non-solicitation with the team members. You can have a non-compete. By the way, you can have a non-compete with a lot of people. It doesn't have to just be a doctor. And so what if the hygienist moves across the street? You don't ever think about that, right? What about the hygienist? I mean, especially in a competitive hygiene market. That was like a Georgia hygiene market. You're not a hygienist anymore. You're a hygiene.
It's like you're wearing your boots already.
That's right. I get my boots for the hygiene.
You get the hygiene market.
Hygiene market. So... But I want you to think about this. I mean, I don't think it's just associates. I want to make sure I make it clear on that. It's what is the agreement that I have with team members I hire, right? And first of all, I want to have enough people coming in that I can pick from them, right? That's a whole nother podcast on how to do that. But I want you to hear me on this is like anybody that you're hiring for your company, there should be some things that they fill out. One of the things I had was years ago, even when I first started dental practice, I had a non-disparagement agreement day one. And someone said to me, well, it won't uphold in court. I said, okay. Well, it's enough for people to go, hey, look, I mean, whatever. It's enough to time up in legal fees or whatever. I just said, look, I mean, I had a non-disparagement, non-agreement, non-compete, non-solicitation. I had those things right away to dental practice, and everyone had to sign them. I think when you start thinking about, and I see this reactive nature, which is the last second, everybody panics. And they start, do you know a lawyer who can do this contract? And it's obviously I had Stuart Oberman on this podcast, who I think the world of. There's some amazing people in the dental field. But I want you to think about that, is because what happens is, and then sometimes with those agreements, it starts to become, rushing the agreement, trying to get it out as quick as possible. I need it by Thursday. And it's like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
You should have had this done 6 months ago. You shouldn't be waiting till someone's sitting in front of you. And then you don't let someone bend your process and start, well, my friend said I get 34%, and so I should be getting that. I mean, I saw a deal not too long ago, and I'm not even going to tell you the deal because it was so bad that it was like, holy moly, who told you that was okay? So there's another part of this too, which, by the way, now I feel like I have to tell. The deal was based on unadjusted production, by the way. So you can I'll leave it there, okay? But I want you to think about this is how do I pay people? How does it make financial sense? And now let's go back to associates. So let's go back to associates for a minute. Okay, so what is my organization willing to pay an associate? What does that look like? What's core criteria that person has to have, right? What am I ultimately looking for for this person? We're not reactive. We start thinking ahead of time, and we start looking way before we need someone, by the way. That's the best thing you could possibly do. If you don't need an associate, start looking, because that will put you in a position when you're ready, right? I had an oral surgeon recently tell me, I start sourcing 3 years out. So what happens is you're already ready, but then know how you're going to pay them. Know how that works in your financials. Have the contract ready. Know all of it. If you're doing some kind of, advanced, I know Tower Leadership, we do an associate blueprint where we talk about how to retain associates long-term and compensation. But those are things like we have way in advance. We have attorneys who have already drawn up sophisticated documents. So we can't wait and be reactive about something that we know is coming, right? That's the same thing that happens with taxes. If you wait till December 31st and go, hey, what should I do about my taxes for this year?
You're done.
You're done, right? I mean,
So from a legal standpoint, I know when it comes to businesses, cash is the biggest thing that hinders people from making decisions. So when it comes to a yearly, if you had to put a number on it and you said every year you should save X amount for legal fees, if it's that, or if it's bring on associate to write up these contracts, what do you think a good number is for a dental practice to have?
I don't want to give a number, and the reason why is because it's all relative. If I've got 14 locations, it's going to be a different cost than if I've got, one, right? But I do think that you have to say is, what are the contracts that I need? What do I need to have in place? What do I make all team members sign? What do I have associates sign? How does that go into my financials? What is it going to look like? What's the ratio? What's the core criteria? All this stuff on the front side, and be prepared to already say, I mean, the greatest thing you can do is sit down in front of a team member or a potential team member, associate, and say, this is how I pay associates. By the way, this is not, I always tell people, look, associate compensation should be great for the associate and great for you. It should be great for both people, right? And one of the arguments I've always made is you try to figure out how to pay associates as little as possible, give them no leadership abilities, and then wonder why they leave in 2 years. No, we want to give them abilities to grow, and we want to give them abilities to be paid well. But we want to know that on the front side. One of the biggest, mistakes that's happened in this industry, for the last decades is an associate walks in and says, I really want equity someday. The owning doctor says, yeah, we'll talk about that at some point.
Yeah,
and then
that conversation never comes up.
And here's what ends up happening. The associate for 2 years is going back to their friends going, I get a buy-in. So the expectation, right? Where chaos happens is when expectations are not met. So then all of a sudden this person starts saying, I'm basically increasing the revenue of something I have to buy. By the way, if you're an associate listening to this, like that's the way business works. Like, by the way, you can't, for instance, if you work at Coca-Cola and you're working hard to increase the value of the stock, you can't say, well, I want to, the stock price keeps going up, I have to buy it more. Yeah. Well, your job is to make the stock go up. That's right. And so, but here's the thing about it is that like the associates should be compensated and taken care of well, but you have to go on the front side and saying no. If you're not going to give up equity, which I'm not a huge fan of unless that's part of your business plan or business model, we don't do it reactively, we do it proactively. If it's part of your business model to bring in partners, it's certainly fine if that's your model. It's a very challenging model. It's rarely successful, but if that's what your model is, that's fine. It can be successful, but it's got to be done very strategically. But I do think that when you start looking at it, you have to say, how do I want to compensate associates? Because you're going to look so much better when you have the contracts in place. You know how you pay them. You know what the long-term compensation is. You do this on the front side. One of the things we work with people to do and we challenge people is have all this ready on the front side. Like know exactly when you sit down with a candidate and say, this is how I compensate associates. This is what
I think most of the time when I have a conversation with doctors too, it's when they're in the process of an associate, I ask them, how long have you been looking? They're like, oh, I've been in this conversation for about 6 months now or 3 months now. We're working out the finer details of the contract. And
oh my gosh,
yes. That's a lot of wasted time. And it's constant.
Moly.
Every phone call I have, it's always that.
What a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. This whole you're right. This is what. So we've been negotiating for 6 months. Stop it. Stop it. Okay, this isn't Cristiano Ronaldo, okay? Like, this is not Messi. Right? Like I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're not bringing on LeBron James.
I mean, it didn't take 6 months to get LeBron James' contract worked out, let alone the associate who just came out of their GPR residency who thinks that they're, worth $1 gazillion. Look. Yep. You're right. This is not some world-class athlete. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but get over yourself. You're not that much of a producer. First of all, by the way, if you're training somebody's skill set up, I hope there's value in that. There's value in you training them to become an amazing associate, learning techniques and skills. And you know what? When people are egotistical, remember, everyone needs to be humble, hungry, and smart. If you got somebody who's not humble, they think that they're God's gift to dentistry and that they can come out of a GPR residency and they should be making $240 that, hitting the ground, like that's probably not your right candidate. Like know what you're looking for. And years ago, one of the best pieces of business advice I was ever given is never hire or work with people who are not humble. They get you sued and get people killed. And I'm telling you, one of the best pieces of advice. So don't hire the person who's like, I'm not going to come here unless I get 33% or whatever the number it is. But I'm not, by the way. And you just go, no, that's not how I pay people. And, well, then I'm not going to come. Okay, don't come. Okay. What are you spending 6 months? And I'm so glad you said that, Matthew. 6 months on a contract for an associate. 6 months? What are you doing? Like, it doesn't take 6 months.
It's literally every conversation that I've had with some doctor that calls in and they're asking about associates and they're always like, yeah, I've got this guy. I've been working with him for the past 6 months. We've been going back and forth on the contract and what it looks like. And overall, like he wants equity, but I don't know if I want to give up equity. So I'm trying to figure out how much I can pay him and all this. I'm like, that's a long period of time that you're trying to get this associate on board. Like, what are we doing here?
The reason why is because, let me tell you how that happens. They all of a sudden, they figured out that they need an associate. Then they start looking. Then they find somebody. Then they ask, do you know an attorney who can do a contract? Then they go back and they get the attorney to draw up the contract. And sometimes that takes a few, let's just say it takes a month. Yeah. And then they put that contract in front of the associate. Then the associate shares it with all their friends and ask, what do you think? And then their friends, of course, want to give them 42 opinions on what they should get paid. And then they go back and they tell you, hey, look, I want to get paid this much because my buddy said so. And then you go back and you call us up and you say, hey, look, they want this much. And then I tell you, no, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't do that. And then you don't listen anyhow and give them half of what they want. And then it goes back to them again. Then they go, and then we do this thing. And then by the time we all get it all worked out, then we have to go back to the final press. We got to get the whole thing printed out. And it's 6 months. And it's like, and then you wake up and you go, and I look at the numbers. I go, why did you pay this person this much? I had a doctor, I said over and over again one time, I said, why do you have in the contract you're going to give up equity? Stop it. Get it out. Like, there's no reason to do that. You're just hiring someone you just met. You just signed basically a prearranged marriage, and you don't even know this person. Why in the world would you put in a contract for any human being, period, that you're going to give up half your company and you've never even worked with them? That is the craziest thing I've ever heard in all. There's no business person who would ever do that. That's crazy. It's crazy.
And I think it's crazy to me that the 3 to 6 months, I feel like most dental practices, when they start thinking about associates, that's like the number one thing that comes up is, it's going to take a lot of my time to put all this together, and it's going to be 3 to 6 months before I even get this done, and I have to focus on the practice. Whereas if you're saying, just to the point you're making, is if you're proactive on this, as soon as you interview an associate, you take his family out to dinner or her family out to dinner, you get to know them, then you put a contract in front of them, and it takes you a month or a month and a half to get this done. The preconceived notion that it's going to take 3 to 6 months to get them onboarded is a fallacy, because if you put these processes in place, more than likely the practice is going to be more willing to bring on associates, because if it was that easy every time, it was just boom, boom, here's a contract. Do you like it? Good.
Well, and quit listening to your dental friends who don't know how to hire an associate on how to hire an associate, okay? Look, you need to think just like a professional corporation. How do I hire someone and keep them on long term? What's their benefit package? What should it look like to stay here? What's the incentive to stay here? All these things have to be thought out way in advance. When somebody comes back and says, well, my buddy just says to pay him this, and so that's what I'm going to pay him. Stop trying to get over on people. Look, find a compensation model that actually fits in with what you're trying to accomplish from a profitability of the practice, and take care of the associate, and think about the long-term game plan ahead of time. This is what it looks like long-term if you want to stay here. This is your benefits package. Here's the advantages. Here's how we pay. Like, you got to sell. By the way, you got to sell. Once you source the right candidate and you say, this is a candidate. Look, when you find that right person, you've got to be able to close the darn deal, which means if you don't have something else that nobody else has, if you're presenting a commodity, which is the same deal that every dang doctor in town has, then you're going to look like every dang doctor in town. And so now if somebody else gives them 32% and you give 30%, you're going to lose an associate, even though the 32% guy, first of all, doesn't have enough patience for them to make enough money. And second of all, there's no long-term game plan. So you have to know the long-term game plan, the short-term game plan. How can they make what, when? What's the benefit package? And then you have to get all this stuff into a contract so that you can put it in front of somebody and say, this is how we pay associates. And so, and by the way, do not bend. This is how we pay. If they walk up to a Heartland dental office and say, I want this. Heartland goes, no, well, let's look for the next person. It's like, because this is how we pay. Now, I'm not trying to compare your office to Heartland or anything like that. I'm trying to say is that you can do things that nobody else can do. As an independent doctor, you can create compensation packages like nobody else. You can do things to bring people on like nobody else. But you have to be proactive, not reactive. You got to be thinking maybe 2 years out, a year out. Like, get with a tower or whatever, where we have advanced planning around associates. You got to think about through those things so you have a plan in place. And then you got to think about the rest of the team too. I do believe, like, so I'll tell you a funny story. Maybe it's not funny. Depends on whose point of view you're looking from. Was a lot of times trade secrets are not shared maliciously. So I'll tell you a story. So there was a doctor, and this doctor was buying a piece of land. And the piece of land, and this is a true story. I've changed the names of the characters for the protection of the innocent. but one doctor had found this piece of land. It was an area that was being developed, and it was an amazing piece of property. So Dr. A makes an offer to buy this piece of land. Well, he goes back and he tells the team, his whole team, hey, I just made an offer on a piece of land off of this road where it's going to be amazing. We're going to build this beautiful office. There's going to be all these people there. So Dr. A's really excited. So he shares all this with his team. Well, one of the young ladies who happened to work with Dr. A also had a part-time job at the country club. So she comes across dentist B, Dr. B, and says to Dr. B, oh, I work for Dr. A, and we just made an offer on this piece of property right here. And so then all of a sudden, Dr. B says, really? And then calls the developer up, makes a cash offer, and buys it away from Dr. A. Now, did the assistant try to be malicious? No. Did she make anything wrong? No. But because inside the organization, there was not a practice of not communicating with the marketplace and talking about that. There was no contract in place around it. What ended up happening was they didn't have an NDA. They didn't have anything where, they were allowed to talk about whatever they wanted to. And this is what happened. And by the way, this is a true story. And so you have to, first of all, communicate with your team. You have to have legal contracts and you talk to your lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. You need to talk to your lawyer about, hey, look, what protections can I have? By the way, state law is different. So you got to look at different states, and each state has their own laws. And you got to look at basically saying, hey, look, what agreements can I protect myself? Protect against people soliciting your team members, right? You don't know if you make somebody mad. What if it's a doctor that you make mad and they try to take your assistant and 3 other people? You got to have non-solicitation agreements. You have to have non-compete agreements. You have to have, right, non-discrimination. And there's a lot of things. I think that there's a lot of documents that you need to have in place. Now, like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I think you need to talk to one. It's one of the reasons I had one on the podcast. Non-disclosure. I said discrimination. Don't discriminate no matter what. Disclosure. Yeah. But also don't discriminate. But I really do think it's important. And I think that one of the things you have to think through is, am I ready to hire the people that I need in my organization? How am I planning on compensating them? Is it in writing? Do I have a long-term game plan? Can I explain to the associate the vision for their position and what it looks like long-term? Can I explain to my team members what their position and what it looks like long-term? Can I protect myself from somebody who goes rogue? All these things need to happen. But what ends up happening is most of the time this stuff gets done because somebody makes a very painful mistake that costs them a lot of money. And so here's what I would encourage you to do. Don't wait for the office manager to take 2 of your assistants or whatever. Don't do those things. Do it. Be proactive and get contracts in place and get compensation models in place. Compensation models. It's not just the contract, right? Now, the attorney can't help you with the compensation model. That's not what they do. They write the contract based on the compensation model. You have to have a compensation model, both short-term and long-term. This is the catch. Both short-term and long-term compensation, not just short-term. Short-term, they leave in 2 years. If you tell them it's all about short-term, we'll look at this thing annually. If you're sitting down with someone and saying this is an annual contract, we'll look at it annually, short-term, they are thinking short-term. You have not painted a vision for them long-term. They don't know what their compensation model is long-term, and they will leave in the short-term. You got to paint a long-term vision and a long-term, compensation model so that they know what that looks like. And then you got to get contracts around that so you can, if let's say associate A, B, and C, you position it because you're bringing enough candidates in, you position for an A, B, and C, and say these 3 people meet our criteria. And then you give it all 3 of them, and person B says, I think that's great. Person A and C says, no, I want to own my own practice with the next 12 months. Say, okay, well, I wish you the best of luck. And you let that person go, or you're able to show that compensation model. And so I think it's very, very important to think about your business and say, Am I being proactive with my compensation models? Am I being proactive with my contracts? Am I protecting my organization? Just the same way you protect yourself with insurance. You need to protect yourself. I'm surprised when someone who says they're a dentist and they've been in business for 38 years and they don't have an attorney. Like
it's like, what do you mean you don't have an attorney?
It just blows my mind. I'm like, you're in business. Like, how do you not have an attorney? Like, how do you not have an attorney relationship with somebody? So if you can't pick up a phone, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you cannot pick up a phone and talk to your attorney, then you need to fix that situation. Like, you need to fix it. I mean, you know, we've obviously had an attorney on the podcast. I think that's great. Maybe you have someone in your area, that's fine too. But I think you have to think about this relationship and say, this is an important relationship. Do not wait. You have no idea what the attorney's working on. So when you come to them in the last second, you might lose out on a candidate. That's another thing we haven't talked about. Is, heck, you might lose out on a candidate because you can't turn a contract around. What if you lose on somebody it costs you hundreds of $1,000s because you didn't have a contract in place, so you couldn't turn it around quick enough? Yeah.
I mean, I have a doctor that called in last week, and he's going to the same situation where there's a doctor that is as soon as he got out of residency, he went to a corporate chain, and then his contract's up with them, and he's deciding between his practice and the endodontist practice. And he was wondering about like what our process looks like and all this stuff, and he's like trying to get him back on the phone to describe a little bit of it and all this. I'm like, he's probably already gone. I mean, it's taking you so long to have a contract in place. And I look at the sports, another sports analogy here is when you have a big time player that is coming to your organization, all the news talks about is the pitch. They fly out to, you know, wherever the headquarters are for that team. So if they're going to LA, they'll fly out to LA, they'll sit in front of the GM and everybody, and they'll lay out the contracts. Like, this is the short-term vision for you as a franchise head, and this is the long-term vision. We can do X, Y, Z. Here's the contracts in place. This is what we can offer you. And then ultimately he decides on if that's the case. But if you looked at it and that high-level individual, an associate, comes into place and you're like, yeah, I might be able to pay you this. We might be able to give you equity. I don't really have the contract drawn up. You know, I don't know what the short-term vision for you at the practice is. I just need the help. I don't know what the long-term vision of the practice is for you. That person's going to be like, wow, that was not a very good pitch for me to join your organization. Like, I don't think I'm going to do this.
Yeah. I mean, what a great point. I mean, it's not just about the contract. I think we spent heavily on the contract, but you have to know what your game plan is long term too. Like, how does this person? I think it's a great point. We're both sports people, if you haven't been able to tell yet. But but it's a great point. What do you do when you get the person that you love, this is the right candidate, and you don't even know? Because then here's what happens: you're going to call me up, or call Tower Leadership up, and you're going to say, "How do I compensate this person?" We should have been figuring out way in advance, proactive, what your model allows them to compensate. What does that look like long term? What is this entire, that's why we have a blueprint plan. But the reason why you do this, lay out the blueprint for them so they can say, what's the long-term, short-term vision? Now, if they say no, do not change your whole damn contract for someone who doesn't fit your model. Like, let them go. They're not the right fit for your organization. It's just going to cause you headache in 2 years when they split. Look, you got to, if somebody doesn't want to stay in your organization long term and is like, I want to own my own practice within 12 months. Okay, let them go find an organization that fits their model. Like now, if you're able to, by the way, show a compensation model like we do, then you can show somebody why it makes actually more sense for them financially to maybe do, a different model. Right, that's right. I know what that looks like, but you got to be brighter than the DSOs on this. You got to understand what your unique selling proposition is. You got to know what makes you unique in the marketplace. You have to have contracts around that. You have to have contracts with team. You have to communicate with the team. You have to do all this stuff proactively. It's really not that much work. It really isn't. Just do it ahead of time. I mean, people take every Friday off to go play golf, but won't spend half a morning to get in their legal stuff in place. Look, take a morning and get all your legal stuff. Take a day. Find one day and get all your legal documents done for your entire organization. So tell your attorney, say, look, I want to have a meeting with you 8 a.m. on Friday morning, and we're going to spend 5 hours or whatever it is, or 4 hours, pay them their time to figure out what contracts I need or whatever the time you need and get this stuff worked out. There'll be a few renditions. You have to work with an organization like Tower Leadership to figure out how that flows into your P&L and how it flows into your long-term compensation model, and then get the stuff in place. Make it happen. Be proactive. Do not wait. That waiting will literally cost you millions of dollars.
Yeah, or team members. It's going to cost you.
Yeah, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. You won't hire team members, right? And then you won't be able to go get Luke Casey's out in Texas. You won't be able to go get boots.
Yeah, you can't do anything.
You'll be bootless, and you'll be crying.
You'll be bootless, associateless. You're gonna be working from the crack of dawn to the end of the day. It's just not a good model.
It's not a good model to go bootless. I mean, I'm telling you, these boots, they better be good, Matthew. I'm talking about some kind of real.
Oh, they're gonna be nice. They're gonna be nice.
Some high. I'll get some vegan person tell me like I gotta get like the vegan. Not if you're vegan, no offense, okay? So look, here's the thing. Make sure this stuff happens, guys. This is like, and Matthew, we came on this morning, and Matthew said, what do you want to talk about? I said that this is a pressing issue. This is something that people need to hear in the marketplace. Is I see this over and over. It's the difference between DSOs and the other. I saw this guy, head of a DSO. And he is Wharton School of Business MBA and a JD from UPenn, okay? If you guys don't know, UPenn's obviously an Ivy League school. Wharton School of Business is the #1 business school, I think, in the world. I mean, it's one of the top business schools in the world. Wharton is above Harvard. I mean, Wharton is the school, right? This is your competition. This is your competition. Understand the market's getting wiser, smarter, brighter, swifter, better. You've got to be able to compete in this marketplace. You can't do. That's why I said don't go ask 10 of your buddies. They don't know what they're doing. They're not MBAs. They don't have the background in this. They probably don't even have associates. Even if they do have associates, that doesn't mean they're compensating well. It doesn't mean they're keeping them long term. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. So be careful about just soliciting advice from everybody. I know this is what happens in the marketplace, but I'm telling you, stop it. It's not the right place. This industry is getting very advanced. And if you don't have an MBA or someone with the kind of experience I do, or somebody who's able to compete, and I'm not talking about a little bit of training stuff, I'm talking about being able to kick ass and take names in this industry right now to be able to get your systems in place, you're going to get left behind. I don't care what they call their organization or the name of their consulting company. I'm telling you, if you cannot move at a quicker pace than everybody else right now, and you do not know your unique selling proposition, all those old workshops that have been rehashed since 1983 are not going to help you. You've got to get advanced. You've got to get fast. You got to know where you're going. You have to go know where you're moving. And if you're not ready, and it doesn't matter whether it's Tower or somebody else, you better be on top of this because the game's changing. And today's podcast is just proof of that game. So get your gear. This message has been furnished by so-and-so law firm. Call us today
call us today. Use the number below at 1-800.
One call. That's all, right? I remember we were in when I was in Norfolk, Virginia. There's this guy. It's Lowell the Hammer Stanley, and he used to go. So it was like I was in the Navy, and this guy would be like, Lowell the Hammer Stanley, get your cash now, cash for accidents. It was like I was like, oh my gosh. There is a guy in Atlanta, and I won't say his name because just in case it pops up in Atlanta. But this guy, and I just blows my mind. Okay, I'll go on a little tangent, and then we'll let the podcast. I tell you guys this. So this guy has got obviously the financial resources to put his name all over Mercedes-Benz Stadium. He's on buses and everything else. And then he says, which I thought was so disrespectful. He's like, for every game that Atlanta United wins, we'll give $100 to a police officer. I was like, $100? Really? I was like, wow, way to go way above and beyond. I was like, the commercial cost you probably $20,000. I will give $12 to every place. Like, how disrespectful.
What is it, 30 games? So you're writing a $300 check, like a $3,000 check?
I was like, this guy is a piece of tar. If you don't realize this guy's a piece of tar, I'm going to give 12 cents to every police. I mean, come on, guy. I mean, $100. By the way, they got to pay, it's considered like bonus pay. So they only get $50 on that because they got to pay half of it. Thanks for $50. I'll go get some fast food or get some DoorDash tonight. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate that.
With inflation, it's like $6 or something, right?
Yeah.
Anyhow.
You're going to McDonald's for the night.
Anyhow, look, if you don't have good legal counsel, you need good legal counsel. If you need some advice, reach out to us. I'm more than happy to hand you a name or two. Find someone in your area, maybe find some colleagues, ask them, hey, who should I hire? Who's a top-notch attorney I should hire? But make sure this is happening. And then if you don't know how to create a compensation model, then, get with us or get with somebody else who knows how to do this. Do not follow every industry like that everyone else is doing. You gotta find a unique way of doing things. You gotta create your own model. It's gotta be unique because it's gotta be a unique selling proposition. You gotta be able to stand out in the marketplace. You gotta do things that nobody else is willing to do. That's how you win. That's how you compete, and that's how you dominate. So, any last words, Matthew? That was a good one. We're at 34 minutes. 34 minutes and 5 seconds. Any last parting words?
No, I think it's just be proactive. That's the number one key. Be proactive with everything you do, and you'll be successful.
Wow. On that note, that's a good whoosh. See you guys next time.